At the Hawkins family mansion, the house was bustling with energy. Mother and daughter were happy to receive the news of James's marriage to Jocelyn. To them, Jocelyn was a perfect daughter-in-law. Now, after hearing that the wedding would be happening in 2 weeks, they wanted to start preparing for this big city event. Hawkins Corp has already confirmed the news of James's marriage with the only daughter and the heirs of the Cowles International Hospitals. Winnie, with excitement, told her mom, "Mom, I am going to call Jocelyn so that we can go shopping together." Nicole was busy reading a book. "It's okay, Winnie, do it, and I will go check on your dad. He's been in his study for too long." Nicole went directly to the kitchen, made her husband's favorite lemonade tea, and took it to his study. With a knock, she entered. "Honey, you've been here since morning, and you look unhappy. It's like you want to bury your frustration in your work. Is something wrong?" Coroner Hawkins was a man of few words. He looked at his wife. She was happy because of the news of her son's wedding. He couldn't spoil her mood. "It's nothing. You know, being the chairman of Hawkins Corporation, considering the crisis we have been having, isn't easy. You know, I am not getting any younger," he chuckled, adding, "Thank you for the tea. I really needed this. You can now go, and I will join you once I am done." As Nicole left her husband's study, she couldn't shake off the feeling that something was amiss. Coroner's usual vigor seemed dampened, and his words held a weight she couldn't ignore. Despite his attempt to dismiss her concern, she knew him well enough to sense his underlying unease. Coroner saw Nicole leaving his study and shutting the door behind her. He sighed. As a father, he knew what his son was going through. He knew James didn't like this marriage in the first place. He's been struggling to make sure that the project succeeds so that he won't marry Jocelyn. It was a father-son secret. He knew that James was putting on a fake smile to show that she loved Jocelyn, but inside he was bleeding. He said to himself, "It looks like I can't do anything about it. His mother and sister are excited about the wedding, which he himself considers a result of that company project failure." The media was talking about this marriage, and most people were wondering if this was a business-related marriage, or if the couple was in love. Of course, they didn't know the mystery between these two families. Jocelyn loved James, but James was willing to marry her because his company was facing a lot of problems, and he needed Jocelyn's family support. Coroner Hawkins was getting a lot of calls from different media platforms, and journalists were trying to ask him about this wedding. But he couldn't give any reviews. He would tell them to talk to the Cowles. They are the ones who released the news to the press. Nicole was sitting in the living, lost in her thoughts, and said to herself, "Winnie is going shopping with her soon-to-be sister-in-law. My husband seems unhappy. Will she be left alone? No, I am going to." She decided to confide in her trusted friend and confidant, Mrs. Hastings. With a quick call, she arranged for an afternoon tea meeting at the local cafe. Seated in a cozy corner of the cafe, Nicole poured her heart out to Mrs. Hastings, recounting the events of the morning and expressing her concerns about excitement for her son's wedding, the media talking about the wedding, and Coroner's well-being, which seems low ever since we got the news of the wedding. Mrs. Hastings, a wise and perceptive woman, listened intently, her gentle gaze never wavering. "My dear Nicole," Mrs. Hastings began, her voice tinged with empathy. "For the wedding, it will be a city hit. Everyone is talking about it. But there's no reason a father wouldn't be happy for his son getting married, especially to the girl from an influential family like yours. Perhaps there's something big that he doesn't want you to know for your peace of mind. I've known Coroner for many years, and while he may not always show it, he carries the weight of his responsibilities heavily on his shoulders. Perhaps there's more to this than meets the eye. Just let him be. He will tell if he wants." Nicole nodded, absorbing Mrs. Hastings' words like a lifeline. She knew there was truth in her friend's observations. Coroner had always been a pillar of strength for their family and the Hawkins Corporation, but even pillars had their limits. Determined to support her husband in any way she could, Nicole, With Mrs. Hastings' sage advice, she returned home, ready to confront the shadows lurking within the walls of their mansion. Jocelyn had left James's office after being called by Winnie to go shopping. Nick saw Jocelyn leaving and decided to ask James about Olga before he could talk to her. He entered the CEO's office seeking answers from James. He looked at him and said, "She found out about you and Jocelyn, right?" James kept quiet. He didn't know what to say. Nick got himself an answer. "I see you broke her heat. Now that your wedding is all over the news and the internet, I came here to tell you that she..." A knock on the door interrupted him. It was Olga. She wanted to ask James why he lied to her for a whole year, and why he made her fall in love when he knew he had a fiancé. Nick knew he had to leave and give them space to talk. Olga entered the office with a cold expression. James looked at Olga, his heart heavy with guilt and regret. He hadn't anticipated her finding out like this, especially not in the midst of the media frenzy surrounding his impending wedding. His silence hung in the air, suffocating him with unspoken apologies and explanations he couldn't find the courage to voice. Olga's expression was a mix of hurt and disbelief as she stood there, waiting for an answer that seemed to evade James like a fleeting shadow. "James," she finally spoke, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion. "I trusted you. I believed in us. How could you do this to me?" James swallowed hard, grappling with the weight of his actions. He had never intended to hurt Olga, but in his pursuit of securing his family's company and appeasing his parents, he had inadvertently shattered the trust of the one person who had truly cared for him. "I'm sorry, Olga," James finally managed to choke out, his voice thick with emotion. "I never meant for things to turn out like this. Please believe me when I say that you mean more to me than you'll ever know." But Olga's eyes were now cold, devoid of the warmth and affection James had once found solace in. "Just like that, James. Sorry isn't enough. You knew very well that you had a fiancé when you were convincing me to love you. How were you thinking it would turn out? That you would keep me in the dark forever? So you're expecting me to believe this nonsense?" "You're insensible, James," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the tumultuous storm raging within her. "Do you remember when we made love? It was my first time. You promised me a lot of things. Marriage, protection, forever happiness, fighting for me and our love. Was it all a lie? Did you mean none of these words? You made me believe in you, and I gave myself to you. I regret that night." Only Olga knew what she was talking about. She's pregnant with his child but can't tell him. She thought to herself, "James, I am leaving. You'll never see me or see the child I am carrying." James had no more excuses. "Come on, Olga. Did I tell you to raise your legs for me? For your information, you are not the only virgin I have ever had, so don't think you're special. Now take that beautiful face of yours out of my office and go to work." James didn't know that Olga had already resigned from his company. "James, I thought you were a man of your word. It looks like I was wrong. But there's one thing for sure. You've made your choice, and now you have to live with it." With that, Olga turned on her heel and left the office, leaving James to grapple with the wreckage of his decisions. As he watched her retreating figure, a profound sense of loss washed over him, a realization dawning upon him that some mistakes couldn't be undone, no matter how desperately one wished for a second chance. 5 minutes. James sank into his chair, feeling the weight of his actions pressing down on him like a suffocating blanket. He had never felt so utterly alone and consumed by remorse. Olga's words echoed in his mind, each syllable a dagger piercing his already shattered heart. "Will I be able to hold you again, Olga? I am already missing you. Would you find it in your heart to forgive me?" He sat in silence, lost in a whirlwind of regret and self-loathing. How had he allowed himself to become entangled in such a web of deceit and betrayal? And at what cost? He couldn't help but feel a sense of emptiness creeping into his soul. Olga left James with a sore heart. She couldn't believe James would say such words. When she was finally out of the building, she let out the tears that she had been holding. She cried, heading to her car. Sitting in her car, a million ideas came to her mind, but all of them would remind her of the great times she had with James. She turned on the radio to listen to her favorite channel, which only added to her frustration. All the stations were talking about the CEO of Hawkins Corporation, James Hawkins, and his college girlfriend, Jocelyn Cowell, the only daughter and heir of Cowell International Hospitals. Wow. The Hawkins also confirmed the information, posted on the company's platforms, even on James's social media pages. I was such a fool to have believed his words. She heard a knock on her car door. Raising her head to check who it was, she saw it was Nick. Oh, not again. What's he doing here? He helped James lie to me. Now he's going to act as if he didn't know. He is James's trusted right-hand man, if I may say. She was talking to herself when Nick knocked again, saying, Olga, please open the door. Give me 5 minutes. Olga was angry at everyone who had anything to do with James Hawkins, a man who lied to her and shattered all her big dreams while he was preparing for his wedding with another rich daughter. What Olga didn't know was that Nick had always loved her. But he couldn't do anything about it because James, his boss, was dating her. Nick now wanted at least to comfort Olga and be there for her. This was not the time to confess his feelings to Olga, but at least he wanted to start by being there for her in this time of need. Olga wiped her tears and took a deep breath, steeling herself for the impending conversation. With a reluctant sigh, she unlocked the car door, allowing Nick to enter. Nick slid into the passenger seat, his expression a mix of concern and apprehension. He knew he was treading on delicate ground, but he couldn't let Olga suffer alone, especially knowing the truth behind James's actions. Olga, I know you're hurting, Nick began, his voice soft but resolute. And I can't begin to imagine what you're going through right now. But please, hear me out. What James did was wrong. There's no denying that. But he's not the only one to blame here. Olga turned to him, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and disbelief. What do you mean, Nick? Are you trying to defend him after everything that's happened? She turned on the radio again to let Nick hear the talk show. Everywhere I go, it's James's wedding, she said, then turned it off again. Nick shook his head, his gaze unwavering. No, I'm not defending him. What James did was unforgivable, and I believe he has already explained everything. I am sorry that I didn't tell you anything. You know I am his secretary. The most important line in my contract is to never say a word of his secrets to anyone, not even his father, who is the chairman. I would have told you and left my job for you, but I thought he was serious about you, not Jocelyn. Besides, would you have believed me if I told you? He was overly romantic with you. You would have thought that I was killing your happiness, and James knew I had feelings for you. What feelings for me? Olga was surprised. Yes, Olga. From that day on, you came to thank me in the parking lot. Why do you think James would always call me to drive him when you were together? It was a way of showing me that I could not get you. But that's not important right now. All I am asking for is a chance to be there for you. I know I have resigned. I can help you get another job anywhere in this country or whatever you need. Anything, Olga. I will always be ready for you. Olga listened in silence, her heart heavy with the weight of Nick's words. In reality, Nick was not at fault at all, so there's no need to be mad at him. So she opened her heart and started crying again. She couldn't hold back her tears, no matter how hard she tried. Nick, thank you for reaching out. Apology accepted. Nick, this man is a monster. You said that you believed that he had explained. No, he didn't. He said that I forced myself on him, so I shouldn't blame anyone. Yeah, that's what he said. After lying to me the whole year, that's the only explanation I got. Nick reached out, placing a comforting hand on Olga's shoulder. I'm sorry, Olga. I wish things were different, but we can't change the past. All we can do now is move forward one step at a time. Do you know where the worst part is? Nick, I am pregnant. Nick's eyes widened in shock at Orga's revelation. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air, the magnitude of the situation sinking in with each passing moment. Orga, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what to say. This changes everything. Did you tell him? What did he say? Orga nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks unabated. I know, Nick. I don't know what to do either. I never expected any of this to happen. But here we are. I don't want him to know about my pregnancy. I am leaving the city tomorrow. I will go somewhere he can't find me or know about his baby. Nick, promise me you'll never tell James about this. Not even in your dreams. Nick took a moment to gather his thoughts, his mind racing with possibilities and implications. I promise, Orga, I won't disclose this to anyone. You have my number. Always call me, and please remember to give me your new number before you go. So that when by any chance James finds out about you and your whereabouts, you'll know before time and hide. We need to figure out our next steps, Orga. You can't go through this alone. We'll find a way to make things right, I promise. Meanwhile, Winnie and Jocelyn were enjoying their shopping spree, trying on dresses and giggling like schoolgirls. Despite the turmoil in James's office, the two women were determined to make the most of their time together, bonding over their excitement for the upcoming wedding. But as they strolled through the bustling streets of the city, Jocelyn couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that had settled in the pit of her stomach. She knew something was amiss with James, something he wasn't telling her. And try as she might to push aside her doubts, they continued to gnaw at her mind like a persistent itch.